Welcome to Module 3, the invasion process. We're getting into the good stuff now. Now that we know what non-native and invasive species are, and the different pathways they use to get around, we can learn about the invasion process. This module will cover the steps of how a non-native species becomes an invasive species. It's not an easy task. There are lots of chances to fail along the way. There are 3 steps to the invasion process: introduction, establishment, and spread. The example shown here is a pet owner releasing their aquarium fish into a water body near their house. Maybe these fish were too aggressive for its tank mates. They grew too big for their tank. The owner wanted to see if they could stock their own pond in the backyard, or they simply weren't wanted anymore. Regardless of the reason, this is a big no-no and a common way that non-native species are introduced to new areas. Let's take these aquarium fish through the invasion process. First, we start with introduction. However the individual or individuals are transported, they must survive the journey from point A to point B, which can be stressful. This could be by boat, trailer, plane, truck, cargo container, styrofoam container, plastic bag, luggage bag, coat pockets, aquarium tank, or attached to some debris. We learned about these pathways in the last module. In our example, these freshwater aquarium fish had to survive the transit in the aquarium or some other container from the owner's house to, let's say, a nearby lake. This was probably a short distance, and they survived being sloshed around, the difference in temperature from inside the house to outside the house, and they had enough oxygen in the water to survive this short hike. After the individual or individuals are introduced into a new water body, those individuals must survive in the environment. When these fish are dumped into the water, they immediately become prey or food to native animals and have to survive any differences from the container water they're comfortable in to the lake water. These differences could be things like pH, hardness, dissolved oxygen, salinity, and temperature, just to name a few. If the new water isn't suitable for the fish's needs, they will probably die within the first day. Low or high water temperatures will easily kill an animal or stress it if it's outside their normal range. The same goes for salinity, which is the amount of salt in the water. If the fish were dumped into the ocean, and they're freshwater fish with no ability to survive in salt water, they would die quickly. If they survived the initial abiotic, or non-living, factors of introduction that we just described, they also have to survive the biotic, or living factors, like being eaten. These 2 fish do not have the home field advantage. They have to seek out shelter, survive any attempts of being eaten or scared off, learn what their food options are, and successfully capture and eat these new food options, all while trying to learn and take in their new environment. That's a lot to worry about the first day of entering a new area. If the individuals are transported to a place similar to its native range, it has a greater chance of survival. The next step is establishment. Remember from our definitions that an established species must be self-sustaining and successfully reproducing. Just because these 2 fish were either smart or lucky enough to survive the first night doesn't mean they'll make it through the entire invasion process. They will have to fight off new diseases and new predators. If this example were a plant, it would have to worry about being grazed on or eaten also. If these 2 fish want to survive and establish themselves in this lake, they will also have to live through the different seasons, rainy and dry seasons, ranges of temperature, dissolved oxygen, and possibly salinity if this water body has some connection to the ocean. Can they survive long enough to reproduce? Are these 2 fish of opposite gender? Do they need the opposite gender for reproduction to occur? Can they find suitable mates in their new environment? Were they already growing eggs or babies before being dumped into the new water body? Does their new environment meet their reproductive needs? Is the sediment type, water flow, water level, hours of sunlight or moonlight, or tide just right for them? For our example, let's say one fish is a male and the other is a female. They survived everything and have found a nice spot on the bottom of the lake to lay their eggs. These fish don't have very specific reproduction needs, and they are able to reproduce successfully. Now they have to hope that their young can also survive in this environment, going through all the same factors they had to, except baby fish are a delicious snack for most things in the water. The two fish protect their spawning beds, and they protect their young by holding them in their mouths when they're in danger. The babies have protection until they're big enough to go off on their own. Let's say the cycle continues. Those babies grow up to be adults and have babies. And those babies grow up to adults and have babies. Now there are multiple generations. Their numbers have increased from the original 2 to 100 in just a few short years. With time, there are more factors involved, like the chances of surviving a natural disaster, or a chemical spill in the lake, and the genetic issues that come with breeding among themselves. These fish are hardy and have survived everything so far, unfortunately. The last step of the invasion process is spread. The introduced individuals spread out from their original introduction site with help from humans or naturally. Reproduction continues once they spread, creating an even larger population. The 100 non-native fishes have now been thriving in their original lake for a couple of years. Some have died from aging, bad genes, disease, or being eaten, but they are replaced by new generations, or even maybe new introductions from other discarded aquarium fish of the same species. There's a new canal being constructed in the neighborhood, and it's going to connect the lake these non-native fish are in to another lake. So the locals can boat in and out of adjoining lakes, boat to the waterfront restaurants, and have access to more fishing. These fish are also going to benefit because now what happens? They mosey on down the canal after it's complete and find a lake similar to the one they just left. The second lake is also connected to more canals, a river, and creeks with spring vents. Some of the fish spread out, leaving that first lake for the new frontier, survive, start reproducing wherever they can, and now they're starting to cause problems in the lakes. Their numbers continue to climb, and people start to take notice of this new abundant fish they had never seen before. This is when most invasive species are found and reported. Oftentimes, it's too late, too expensive, or not feasible to get rid of all of them because they're spread out far across multiple water bodies. Congratulations to the 2 fish from a single aquarium release. They successfully made it through all the hoops of the invasion process. As you can see, the chances of making it through even the first couple of days are slim, with all the forces of nature acting against them. Now, scientists will have to study them, monitor what impacts they're having on the native species and humans, and decide how they want to manage them. Why is a species invasive here in its introduced environment, but not in its native range? That's a really great question. All the living and non-living things in an environment evolve together over millions of years. They pressure and influence each other in a complex but healthy relationship. The food web in a species' native range contains predators, prey, competition, and diseases that decrease their abundance. When a species is introduced to a new area, they are released from these factors, and this allows their numbers to increase and opportunities for impacts to occur. To wrap this up, invasion is a relationship between 3 things: propagule pressure, abiotic factors, and biotic factors. Propagule pressure is the number of introduced individuals. In our aquarium fish example, our propagule pressure was 2. Abiotic factors are those non-living things we've touched on, like salinity, temperature, pH, nutrients, sunlight, sediment type, and water flow. Biotic factors are living factors, like being eaten by another animal, competing for the same space and food as others, and diseases. In the invasion relationship, biotic factors come from the new environment, the species already living there, and the new invading species. One or more of the introduced individuals must survive all of the biotic and abiotic factors to become a successful invader. Here are some last thoughts on the invasion process. The more individuals introduced, the more likely an invasion will be successful. Don't underestimate a small number of individuals, though. Not all abundant species become invasive, and not all invasive species are abundant. Look at our hypothetical fish example of 2 fish making their way from an aquarium into a lake and eventually into 2 lakes with canals, creeks, springs, and a river. They beat the odds. Living and non-living barriers exist at each of the 3 steps of the invasion process, making the chances of a successful invasion very low. Most failed introductions go undocumented. How would we know how many introductions there are that failed? We can't be everywhere at once, and it's unlikely that someone would willingly report an animal or plant they put into the water. Little data exists on failed introductions because of this. Lastly, all communities can be invaded because where there are humans, there are invasive species. If you'd like to learn more about the invasion process, check out the following papers.